He has all the details of this budget.
Well, thank you. And first, I want to thank all of the executive leadership team members and department heads for all of the time and effort that went into putting this budget proposal together. We've been at this now for about 8 weeks, and many meetings, and we're bringing to you as you can see from the cover page, the first draft of the budget proposal. Realizing this is a work in progress, we will continue to refine over time as we receive additional information. You've got a one-pager that's landscaped that says outstanding items. These are just an example of some of the items where we haven't received any information. All of these come to us from Metro Finance, and we haven't received any of these yet for the 2016-17 fiscal year. So we're assuming there's going to be some changes in some of these that we receive, as well as maybe some other areas too. So this really is a work in progress. But I do want to thank everyone for their involvement. Particularly want to thank Glenda Gregory, who I think this is our 13th budget we've put together. I stole Glenda from Metro Finance 13 years ago, and she's a Maplewood graduate and has a CPA and MBA from Belmont, so I'm fortunate to have her on staff, as well as the new addition, Brian Hull, who I stole from the State Department of Education. He has a master's degree from Vanderbilt in economics, and so we've got a good team that works hard to put this together. So with that being said, I'll ask Glenda she's just going to put on the screen what you have already as a hard copy. And so I'm going to walk you through the document, again, as Mary said, realizing that we now only have 25 minutes. So if you'll turn past the cover sheet and go to document number 1. It says document number 1 in the top right corner. This is our summary of changes. It's the same format that we've used in prior years. It has been well received over time because it's in a synopsis. It's showing what the proposed changes are on a one-page document from current fiscal year amended budget to the proposal. And so I'll spend most of the time on this one document and then obviously come back for any questions that you might have. But as we've included in the past, the top portion is employee compensation. We've included here approximately $13 million in additional compensation, additional pay for our employees. Of course, the majority of that would be going to the teachers. You can see we're proposing a reinstatement of the step increase that we have not had a step increase for a number of years. It's caused and created an issue with our teacher salary schedule. It's caused some morale issues with our teachers. And so working with James Hockaday and Craig Ott and Susan Thompson in our Human Resources Department, we have come up with something based upon the presentation, Ms. Spearing, that was made at your Teaching and Learning Committee, where we looked at what do comparable cities pay for teaching staff, and we realized that our starting pay is pretty good in relation to cost of living and in relation to what other similarly situated districts pay. Where we fall behind is in the 5 to 10 year area, where we have some experienced teachers, where with the way that the current teacher salary schedule is formulated, we fall behind some of our peer cities. And we're looking at the same cities that are being reviewed for the Director of Schools search. And so we feel like through some changes that we can make in the salary schedule that we've already discussed with MNEA, and we'll continue to have discussions with MNEA, that we can have a salary schedule that will be more competitive in those areas where we have fallen behind a little bit. So we've got around $13 million in additional pay included in this proposal. We have almost $1.8 million for our certificated insurance increase. This was approved by the Insurance Trust. And it reflects about a 3.7% increase. All of our certificated employees, their insurance benefits, they are dictated by the Insurance Trust, which is made up of 3 school board members, 3 MNEA reps, and an administrative rep and a retired teacher rep. And so this is what has come out of the Insurance Trust. We've included it here in the budget. Taking you down to the middle part of the document, wanted to spend a little time on the charter school discussion, because obviously I know that will come up. We are adding one new school, KA at the Crossings, which is a Knowledge Academy school that was approved by the board. They're estimating 200 students. We also have an increase in existing schools based upon the number of students that were estimated in the current year budget and what's being estimated for next year. And we also are planning for a per pupil increase for the current students based upon an estimated revenue amount and estimated total number of students. We're also reflecting here a decrease based upon a reduction in district-run schools of 401 students in kindergarten through 12th grade. Now, we are actually experiencing an increase in enrollment in our district-run schools, but that increase is solely in pre-K, and that's solely due to our federal pre-K expansion grant. And so overall, pre-K through 12, district-run schools enrollment will increase a little bit, but if you look only at grades kindergarten through 12, there is a projected 400 student decrease, and we're using a per pupil amount here of $6,100 in that reduction. And what this reflects is the analysis that we've done of schools that send students to charter schools, and I probably didn't say that exactly right. These would be students that are zoned to attend district-run schools, and what those district-run schools' average student-based budgeting amount would be. And so we have tried to, instead of looking at the average across the district, we've tried to do some analysis as it relates to where the students would be zoned that go to charter schools if they stayed in the district and attended district-run schools, knowing that some of them may not have gone to their district-run schools. They may have gone to an optional school. They may have gone somewhere else. But this, I think, is a little more accurate of a reflection of what the reduction would be, because we are not going to be educating these 400 students in district-run schools. And so we're showing that as a cost reduction or budget reduction, realizing that with the increase in the charter sector, if these students would have stayed with the district-run schools, we would have also had an increase to the budget, because we would have had to have hired additional teachers. We would have had to send out more money through student-based budgeting to our district-run schools. And so there would have been an increase regardless if the students would have stayed in district-run schools. But this is a reflection of the revenue transfer that's required based upon current state law, the average state and local revenue per pupil amount that's transferred to our charter schools. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit, but I wanted you to know what this means and why we're reflecting it this way. We also have at the bottom, under proposed changes, a lot of what you saw last Wednesday with the 4 new initiatives that were discussed over that 1-hour meeting. As I mentioned during the meeting, that reflected about a $22 million increase overall in what was shared with you last Wednesday. And you've got a little more breakout here of what some of those things are. The district staff development, the vast majority of this is the EL stipends for additional staff development for EL teachers. We also have stipends for our new teacher academy, which was shared with you as part of our retention plan, and so we've included that here as well. We are transitioning some items from our federal Title I budget over to the operating budget, and the reason that we're doing that is because we are projecting to have fewer federal Title I dollars available for the district next year. And so we're doing everything that we can to not reduce the amount of Title I dollars that are going directly out to schools for schools to spend based upon their priorities that are set in their school improvement plan. And so what we're trying to do is some of the items where we have items that are both in the federal Title I budget, but they're also over in the general purpose operating budget, to put them all in the general purpose operating budget. And so there were some reading recovery teachers, and I believe the summer clinics included in federal funds, federal Title I funding, that we are proposing to move over to the general purpose operating budget, and that's almost a $2 million number. And then we also have, we had over time 6 pre-K classes that had been funded through federal Title I dollars. And they were instituted and paid for and funded with federal Title I dollars a number of years ago. We're proposing to move those over, which is 6 teachers and 6 assistants at a cost of about $650,000, so that all of the pre-K is now included in the general purpose operating budget, as well as all of the reading recovery teachers included in the general operating budget. We have the literacy program that we spent a lot of time discussing, not a lot of time, we spent a little time discussing last Wednesday, but we can spend a lot more time discussing that, and we've had these discussions as it relates to the literacy program, both in the Teaching and Learning Committee, as well as a presentation that Dr. Lipsey made to the full board a number of months ago. Then we have the English Learner Plan, the EL Plan, that was shared with you both last Wednesday as well as at a previous school board meeting when Kevin Stacy made a presentation to the board, and it was discussed, and you have the one-page summaries on these that were shared with you last Wednesday. Community Achieves, the same. It's an expansion of the Community Achieves program. Dr. Majors and Allison MacArthur made a presentation to you last Wednesday. We've also included 22 additional special education bus drivers and 32 bus monitors in the budget. Mr. Carr can speak to that if there are specific questions as it relates to special ed bus drivers. I know some of the bus monitors, some board members have requested that we have bus monitors not only on special education buses but also on some regular education buses, and so that's why we have more monitors here than are being requested for the special ed buses. And then we have just various line items that are included throughout the line item budget, additions and reductions. So you can see bottom line number. The request at this point, the proposal at this point is about $42.5 million increase, which represents a 5.2% increase over the current year budget. I will tell you that so far, the information that we've received regarding our revenue, the Metro Finance Department has sent us some preliminary revenue estimates, which at this point show an additional $15 million in additional revenue, local revenue. We've also received a preliminary estimate from the State Department as it relates to additional BEP revenue associated with the governor's budget proposal, and that's also about a $15 million increase. So we're looking at a revenue estimate at this point of about $30 million, and so you can see right now there's a gap between the estimated revenue and what the proposal is of $42.5 million. There are a few ways to handle that gap. One would be additional revenue being allocated to the school district to cover it. Another would be budgeting some fund balance to cover it, which we have done in previous years, did last year, this past year, budgeted some fund balance. And then the third option would be to make reductions to the budget proposal to get it in line with the revenue estimates. So just to let you know where we are as it relates to current revenue estimates and what the budgeted expenditure proposal is. If I could just take a few more minutes, walk you through the documents, explain what they are, and then for whatever time we have left, try to answer any questions. So if you go to the next page, document number 2, this is something we include every year, and it shows all of the proposed position changes in the budget. And so if you have any questions about any position change that's in the line item budget, we can try to answer those, but we try to be transparent as it relates to the positions that we're not only adding but also reducing. And so you can see what they all are, and of course there's not room here to give any real explanation as it relates to some of the positions. Many of these, the vast majority of these, have already been discussed last Wednesday through the discussion of the initiatives, which would be the EL initiative, the literacy program, reading recovery initiative, community achieves, etc. The next document, number 3, we include this every year just to show the board and the public the work calendars of our 10-month support employees. Of course, they are based upon the number of student days in the school district calendar, And we have 175 student days that will be the same for next year. There are 16 days that 10-month support employees are paid for vacation and holidays, and then there are also some additional days that these employees are paid to work over and above the number of student days for orientation, for training, and for administrative duties. And you have the total number of paid days for each of these different types of 10-month support employees. And then if you go to the next page, which is document number 4, this is a breakdown of our pre-K model centers, one at Ross, one at Bordeaux, and the one at Casa Azafran, as well as the administrative infrastructure support. There's a note at the bottom. We are opening a new pre-K model center this year in Antioch, the Southeast Early Learning Center, but that will be totally funded by the federal pre-K expansion grant. So it's not included in the operating budget because it's being funded by the grant. The next page, document number 5, shows the breakdown of our alternative learning centers, Johnson Middle School and Bass. Johnson and Middle School are both located at the same location, but you can just see the breakdown there. This is account number 2600 and the line item budget, and you'll see the number of positions and the total dollars the same in the line item budget. Next page, document number 6, breaks down all of our non-traditional schools, which are found in account number 2650. And you can see the Middle College, of course, is located at Nashville State. Big Picture is located at Martha Vaught. The 3 academies, Old Cockrell, Hickory Hollow, and Opry Mills. The virtual school, Transitions, which is located at Bass, and then the Cone School. What those are. And then the far right, you've got total number of positions, total budget dollars that you'll see in account number 2650 in the line item budget. The next document, document number 7, is something that came from the 2008 Student Assignment Plan, where included in that plan was a requirement for the district to have a separate account and a separate document for the additional resources that were dictated in that plan for these 9 schools. These 9 schools specifically. And so you can see for Buena Vista, Cockrell, Napier, Park Avenue, Schwab, and Churchwell, the elementary schools. You can also see the 2 middle schools, McKissick and John Early, as well as Pearl Cone High School. The additional resources that were set in the student assignment plan, the majority of those being for reduced pupil-teacher ratios and for school counselors. We also include here the cost of transportation because, as you know, there is still transportation provided to students that want to attend school outside the Pearl Cone cluster in the Hillwood cluster with yellow school bus transportation provided as part of our zoned option choice that families can make. And then document number 8 shows all of our charter schools individually, shows the estimated state and local funding that we are using in the budget, which we are projecting at $9,300 next year per pupil. We've got currently 27 charter schools, with, as I said, with a new one opening next year, so we'll have a total of 28. We also have 2 schools, as you know, in the State Achievement School District, Brick Church and Neely's Bend. Next year, Neely's Bend, 5th and 6th grades will be in the Achievement School District, and we will continue to educate 7th and 8th grades in the district, in our district. The difference between the charter school funding, which, as I said, is a revenue transfer, and the Achievement School District is, as noted by the double asterisk at the bottom of the page, the state allocates BEP, or actually a state and local revenue, directly to these schools in the ASD prior to disbursement to the district. So none of the money that goes to Achievement School District schools none of that money flows through the district. It's all sent, transferred directly from the State Department of Education to the ASD schools. And then we also include in the far right column an asterisk for schools that will be adding a grade in the next year. And then I guess the final budget document is document number 9. This is our 30-page line item budget, 30-page line item document. that shows current year approved positions and approved amended budget. Columns E and F show the proposed position changes and proposed budget changes, which result in columns G and H. And then we have a remarks column, column I, which is intended to provide some additional explanation and additional information for you and everyone else as it relates to what's included in these specific line items. Each account basically has the same type of line item within it: certificated salaries and clerical salaries and support salaries, and then supplies and materials, other benefits and travel and contracted services. And so you'll find those line items that tie back to the State Department of Education's chart of accounts. You'll find those for most of the accounts in the line item budget. And then the last page is just what I have called over the years sort of a cheat sheet, which is a document that's in alpha sort, which shows if you have an idea of what the account name might be, then you can find the account number in the line item budget. And so hopefully that might be helpful if you're looking for a specific account to keep you from having to try to scroll through the 30-page document. So I know we only have 5 minutes left, and I apologize, but I wanted to try to go through these as quickly as I could, and Ms. Pierce just open it up for any questions that anybody might have for the time that we have remaining.
Right. Does anybody have any questions? We're meeting next Wednesday with a joint meeting with Metro Council. Chris and I have both been trying to work with Councilmember Kendall on exactly how we want to lay that meeting out. But my hope is that we can continue to do a deep dive as a board on the individual areas. I have one question, but wanted to see if anybody else has any questions first.
I have a few.
Sure.
Okay. First of all, I think you might have mentioned, what is the cause of the Title I reduction in funding?
And Dr. McCarter is here for that specific reason, and I'll give my best answer. What the cause basically has been is, with the last couple of years, we have pushed more and more of the federal Title I funding out to schools. And I can't remember what the percentage is of the total, but it's a very high percentage. They have been doing a really good job as we have transitioned to school-based budgeting of spending that money, which means we have less carryover money to go toward the next year. And so the carryover money that we have been using in prior years has decreased over time as part of the funding, the total funding amount. And so it's really just related to a reduction in the carryover funds that are available to be spent. And it's because schools have done a good job in spending the money that's been allocated to them.
Okay.
Is that correct, Dr. McCarter? She's nodding, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
All right. One other question, or two other questions real quick. So the difference in the decrease in the charter school students, I'm curious as to why the funding for those students is actually lower than the average per pupil cost. I know you said it was based on the schools, but I find it interesting because I thought that a lot of our students were coming from the lower income schools or perhaps the enhanced option schools that were actually spending more per pupil. So there may not be a quick pat answer to that, but I was wondering why it's that much less than our average.
And this is a decrease of 401 students in the district-run schools.
Right.
Not in charter schools, but in the district-run schools, kindergarten through 12. And the lower amount is because this is reflective of what our best estimate is of the student-based budget, the amount of student-based budget money that goes out to schools for them to spend,
Okay.
which is higher than the district average.
Okay.
To your point, because the majority of students that go to charter schools come from schools that are higher funded than the average because they're the higher needs schools. And so what we try to do is to get a more accurate reflection of what that per pupil amount is that we can reduce in the district budget for the decrease in district-run school students rather than just using the average across the district. And so this decrease of 401 students is the decrease in district-run schools for our K-12 students. And it's shown
I'm not sure I still understand, because it seems to me that would be, maybe I don't want to take too much time up, but it seems to me they'd be coming from the higher funded schools.
The
They are.
average is 5,666 at the school
Okay.
level. So this is a reflection of about 500 more per student. Is that right?
Right. And so what this does
Okay.
not include would be
Indirect.
all of the things that do not go out to schools through student-based budgeting, such as transportation, maintenance,
Okay.
utilities,
Okay.
IT,
That makes sense.
some of those kinds of things. So it's not a comparable number to the $9,300 transfer
Okay.
to the charter schools, because not everything goes out to schools through student-based budgeting. Some is held back and provided centrally.
Got it. Okay, and last quick question. How are we selecting, I love that we're getting these monitors, I think but how are we selecting which buses are getting monitors?
I assume it would be based upon incidents, disciplinary
Okay.
incidents on buses, et cetera. I'm sure our transportation department is well aware of which buses have the most problems, and have the most incidents, and that's where they would be placed.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Go ahead.
Chris, would you show us where it is in the budget for the consultants? How much are we paying for consultants for the district?
Well, consultants would be throughout the budget, and they would typically be in a contracted services line, but we can look that up. It's not going to be in one line. It's going to be in whichever account uses the consulting services. And so it's going to be spread out through the line item budget. But it would typically be found in a contracted services line, and would be identified over in the remarks column I, as consulting, some type of consulting service. But if you have a specific question about types of consultants or certain consultants, we can look that up for you, because we'll have a contract with them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Deanna, do you have anything? I just had a question on the federal grant that we're using for the new pre-K model scenario. How long does that last?
I think it's a 4 or 5, I'm looking for, total of 4-year grant. Goes through 2018.
Okay.
And one question that's come up, and I'll just throw it out there, is the sustainability of that. What are we going to do? And we've had our own discussions. What are we going to do once that grant runs out with those pre-K classes? And so that's something that needs to be discussed and considered moving forward.
And as we consider to continue to move through, we can look at what we're spending state and locally on pre-K as well.
We can. We can do a per pupil on pre-K or any other area that anybody wants us to calculate that.
Go ahead.
I'm beating my same drum from last time, but I'm trying to reconcile. I'm trying to figure out if we have alignment against any kind of operating philosophy. And so it's not intuitive to me that we would spend $42 million more when there's not significant growth that I know of within the district, and a lot of it is central. And so we're saying we're pushing towards student-based budgeting, get the decision-making and that power and influence to the closest to the point of impact, which is at the level of the student and the leaders in that school. And yet, this contradicts that directly. And so I would not vote for, if we were up for a vote right now, I would not vote for this. Based on that alone, because there's a contradiction in the stated philosophy and then how it's actually playing out. And so how do we reconcile that? Or how do we explain $42 million of additional spending?
Well, $22 million of it is right down here under proposed changes that were discussed last Wednesday. And so it's a matter of, is that something that's a priority to the full board that you want to fund for the coming year, for the EL plan, for the literacy program, Community Achieves, et cetera?
And this is probably a question really for the board. It's just like, I think we have to grapple with this. It's just, we keep saying that we want to reduce as much of the centralized support as possible, because with all those resources, I'm not even saying necessarily we should spend less, but it's surprising to me that we would just put all that in a central pot, rather than dispersing those funds out to the schools. It's just there's no alignment here in terms of the philosophy.
And I will say, one thing that we discussed last week was a lot of the EL plan is being dispersed out to schools through the student-based budgeting formula, where we increased the EL weight from 10% to 20%. And so a lot of the EL plan is going out to schools through the student-based budgeting. But you're right, some of this other is not necessarily a part of the student-based budgeting philosophy.
Could I respond to that? Mary, may I respond to that?
Before
I think it boils down to, do we think that the central office is leading us in a way that is will give us better student achievement? And I don't think that it's wise to have a large number of schools in a large district like this all operating independently. I think it is wise to have common philosophies. So rather than having a district full of independent schools, we have a district schools. And our central office is vital to that. Our central office is vital because, as principals will tell you, they're not all literacy experts. They have expertise in other areas. But because we have central office, we have expertise that we can draw on.
Who are the top performing, top 5 elementary schools that are, in terms of reading performance? What are they?
You actually interrupted me. I just want to say that to respond to that, it depends. You can't just look and say these are the top performing kids or these are the top performing schools unless you look at our baseline. How much poverty is in that school? That makes a major difference.
Absolutely.
So you got to compare apples to apples.
Let's do that. I mean, I just want to see the data. Because there's an operating assumption with what you're saying, that the central office is the central driver of the best results that we're currently getting. And it implies, by the way, of course we need a central office. I'm not saying we should do away with central office. I'm asking why we would grow it when, to date, the district as a whole, the brutal facts of our situation are that we have plateaued. Like, by and large, the district is not moving aggressively in terms of achievement. We've got some wins here, but like generally the trend line is flat. And so if we're talking about looking at DC, we're looking at Denver, we're looking at different districts who are on this kind of a curve. I'm just questioning whether or not, right, like we should assume that adding more to the central office is the key.
Well,
so that's, yeah.
May I respond to that?
Yeah.
What I'm hearing you say is that all of this money is going to the central office. That is not accurate. We have 40 some odd new re and recovery teachers. They are not going to be sitting at central office. They're going to be in the schools. So to say that central office, making central office heavier is inaccurate, incorrect. So those are, they will be in our neediest, most lowest performing schools from our data, and that is vital to moving our district. And the reason that we have had flat scores have something to do with more than just metro schools. It's flat across the state, and the state sees this, and they are doing some different things. So things are getting ready to change in terms of literacy across the state.
Can I interrupt? I think they're ready for our executive session, but this is the kind of healthy dialogue I would love to see us continue, and always remembering there are different philosophies that each board member brings, and so it is just starting to define those and work them out without getting personal. So I think this is great dialogue. Thank you for coming, and we will continue this next week.
Mary,
I think we need to go. Sure, do you want to finish?
Well, I'm going to keep asking the same sort of question. So most I just want to tee up the next conversation, because what Jill said makes a ton of sense. But even under that, there's an underlying assumption then that reading recovery, or like putting out in the schools, is the most effective way to drive student achievement, which is why I'm asking for the data.
Right.
So there's two. It's a simple argument of like central or no central. It's about like it's a philosophy, yes, which I thought we leaned into in terms of student-based budgeting, but then also what is most effective, not because of what we think like generally, but what the data says in terms of the most effective schools. So I feel like for the next conversation, it would be helpful to root it, like have a data-based conversation about what are the most effective drivers, because all of us want the same outcome. No one's, I mean, we agree about that.
Right.
I think the question is just, like, how?
Right, absolutely, and that follows it with EL. I'd asked last week for the 20 schools that they're going to be using and listing as their top drivers, and I haven't seen that yet, so that would be great if I could get that list as we continue in this dialogue.
That sounds great.
Thank you. So we'll be back at